And so when we think about what it means to call in and call out the injustices in this world, what we're talking about is really having the self-awareness to realize that we were raised in a society where we have biases that are sometimes known and sometimes unknown. And that part of moving through and shifting and changing that within our society is having events like this, having discussions like this, and really bringing that self-awareness and action together. So I just want to thank you all for being part of this tonight. We are excited to highlight part of our solidarity statement that we co-created back in June 2020 and then revised this last summer. So the part that we're going to focus on today is we as social justice collective of change makers are committed to uplifting and providing a better quality of life for our community. We are educational leaders, scholars, and activists fighting against systemic and institutional racism and inequities. So as I mentioned, I'm here to give you the welcome and the solidarity statement. We're going to do the movie screening now, and then afterwards we will have a land acknowledgement and then another discussion. So without further ado, I will get us started on the video. And I'm going to hand it over to Marques here.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me with the mic. You probably see me around signing you in and handing out popcorn. My name is Marques Spencer. I'm one of this year's graduate assistants for #BLM here. And I just wanted to take the time to recognize that was a really positive and beautiful film. I had never seen it. I don't know how many of you in here had seen it prior. And I really appreciated all the intersectionality within it and how it brought together so many positive aspects of life. And now I would like to introduce a good mentor of mine. She's going to do a land acknowledgement for us. And without further ado, I'll give it over to Dr. Myers.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I had the opportunity this weekend to go to the Museum of Us, and there's a beautiful Mayan exhibit there. And one of the things that struck me is that they engaged Mayan consultants to really tell their story. And one of the first things they did was acknowledge the land. So I think the Kumeyaay Nation. So I'm going to do the same. I want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. I want to pay respect to the citizens of the Kumeyaay Nation, both past and present, and their continuing relationship to their ancestral lands. Thank you. This is such a gorgeous meeting. Thank you.
All right, so before we transition into our movie discussion, where we're going to break down some of these cool topics you see on the screen, I'd like to introduce some of the esteemed guest speakers we have with us today. I'm sure you see some familiar faces around the room, so I won't take the spotlight away from them. We're going to go from left to right, and I'll start with.
Oh, me? Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Pierson. I'm on the faculty here in Communication Studies, if you didn't know that. I'm always excited to talk about this film as a person who's from the west side of Chicago, a generation before the people that we meet in this particular film. But it's always good to be able to talk about home. So is Arshay, is
Doesn't
he?
look like he's on.
It doesn't look like he's on, okay.
But if he pops in, then I'll
Okay.
just interrupt and let you know.
Yeah, he and I text back and forth, and he's got to run to the airport and do some things. So he said if the opportunity presented itself, he would certainly stop in and chat with us a little bit. So.
Thank you, Dr. Pierson. And then I'll hand it over to our last guest.
Hi guys, nice to see you all this Friday afternoon. My name is Julianna. I'm a senior coxswain, fourth year coxswain I'm an accounting major, Spanish minor. Outside of rowing, I'm also in a sorority, Kappa Alpha Theta. I'm part of the university ministry, and I'm also recently left them, but love them still. Part of the Mariachi ensemble on campus. But yeah, all the fun facts about me if you guys didn't know. Yeah.
Is there a specific question, but I'm curious, for you all, how many of you had seen the movie before? So just a couple of you had. So those of you who hadn't seen the movie
Oh,
before.
Dr. Pierson, so people can hear online,
Oh,
can you use the
okay.
microphone, then
All
it
right,
connects with Zoom, sorry.
All that theatrical training and projection just goes out the window. Okay, all right, I try to work without a mic, but I can do that so the people at home can participate. So I'm curious as to your reactions to the film. Those of you who had not seen it before.
It's very good. I learned a lot. I think it's very powerful.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot there. It covers a 20-year period of time and really I think brings things back full circle. The program, from what I understand, is Marques is still working with the program, but rowing programs cost money, and sometimes programs like this go away because of funding. You just don't have the funding for them. And one of the things that I enjoyed about it, being from that community, Natalie was my neighborhood high school, but because I was a special admission person, I got to go to Lane Tech High School, which was it was considered sort of the city's smart kids. That's where we went to school. So I was able to sort of remove myself from a lot of those conditions just because I got the opportunity to go to a different high school. And as I said, their story sort of takes place in the 90s, and I'm a generation before that in terms of when I was in high school. What did you learn that was new, that you didn't know?
We have one comment from online. You want to read it up out loud? Oh, you can use this microphone.
Oh, okay.
All right, so Doris, she wanted to ask, I kept wondering why I hadn't heard the story before. We tend to mostly hear the negative stories reported, unfortunately.
That's a great question. I was introduced to this film at Roger Ebert's Film Festival about 2 years ago. The film played there and got a really great response from, and I shouldn't say played there, it was scheduled to play there and we had to do an online screening because of COVID. So one of the things that really sort of took the film out of maybe a wider swath of people seeing it was that it just came out, right in the middle of COVID when people weren't going to the movie theaters anyway. So that hurt the people finding out about it. But it's opportunities like this where we hope that then you'll tell other people about it, and then people will get to see it that way, because it dispels a lot of the stereotypes, but it also, I think, points to the importance of schools as a way to expose people to things that they didn't think were available to them. I shouldn't say this. I happen to be a championship square dancer, which I learned in after-school programs when I was in grammar school. In my grammar school, it was like we had what they call the social center, and we had a teacher who taught dance. And square dance was one of the things that she taught, which was something that culturally I wouldn't have seen myself wanting to participate in. And I really did enjoy it. I'm curious to you all, one of the things and maybe you can help with this. The spiritual aspect of this, the water and the calmness and that kind of thing. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm religious, Catholic, but in relation to the water, I know you guys all feel it too, that feeling of like the rhythm, everyone's happy, positive, of that like almost flying through the water. I think that's what is so like, it's like that breath of fresh air. Being on the water before, when no one's there, before class, before the rush of school and, other activities and just before the news comes on, like you have that like time on the water to just, it's like a breath of fresh air when everything is going right. And I think similar, like spiritually, like they were talking about, it's like that escape almost from real life.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if you guys agree like that. Breath of fresh air, like this morning, if you guys are gonna go, like, we were just, it felt so good and everyone was positive and like having a good time and yeah, I see Gigi up there.
Yeah, I was gonna comment, one of the guys that was rowing had made a comment about how he just felt like when he gets on the water, kind of like nothing else matters and he's able to just forget about like any problems or anything that he has going on in his life, and I feel like I can definitely relate to that, and I know a lot of you guys can as well. So it's kind of just like a way for you to like almost escape and like just clear your head.
No, okay, again, I'd like to hear from you all because I teach film for a living and I could talk a lot about technical stuff and that kind of thing, but I'm curious as to what you learned, what you took away from the film, or what you might be interested in knowing more about. And also Craig Nash, who works at Manly High School, he and I actually went to high school together. So I always feel like I got like 2 degrees of separation when it comes to this particular film because it's from my neighborhood and having gone to high school with Craig. But what do you want to know? Yes.
Yeah, I heard the beginning part of the story. Marques was like interviewed on the radio. I heard the beginning part on the radio, and I had no idea that they had come back together and like rowed another race in like 2019. And it was also really eye-opening to like see it on a screen and see the actual people behind the stories and hear them telling the story. You get to see them living through that instead of just like hearing the narrative. So I thought it was a different perspective. That was really cool.
So had you heard about the film or had you heard about them as rowers?
Marques was telling the story of them
Okay.
becoming the rowing team.
I just thought it was super interesting to hear the whole gang aspect of them growing up and the trauma levels when they talked about those statistics. It was super eye-opening and surprising. I feel like as a white person, I'm very privileged not to have to deal with that type of lifestyle and see it in my daily life. And I feel like that's something that was super eye-opening to hear about and to hear the stories and watch. And I can only imagine like the types of trauma that they walk with in their daily lives. And so I just wish more people had the opportunity to have that breath of fresh air, like if not rowing, if something else, to just clear their heads of that, because it was just really hard to hear, and I'm sure it's very hard to live through as well.
I kind of back to what Clara said, I've heard about that, like the first Black rowing club in Chicago before. But in the sense that I heard about it, it was only of like the first Black rowing club, not like the stories behind them, but like kind of the trauma that they dealt with as kids and the reason that the rowing club started. And it was kind of impactful to like see what rowing did for them and not just, oh, it was the first club.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to understand that doing this film is an opportunity to talk about that trauma, because when you live it, when you're in it, it's a norm. It's not unusual. It's not, it's very difficult for you to get outside of it and even sort of think of it as trauma, because it becomes, it becomes sort of the norm that you learn to sort of live with. And, you know, at 13 years old, when someone's asking you, would you be the pallbearer of a funeral because one of your classmates has died in a knife fight, you don't think about that in terms of trauma. You think about that in terms of this happens a lot. Black mothers bury their sons a lot, and you don't think of it. And I think one of the things that a documentary like this does is it allows them actually to have a moment of reflection and about what they've been through. Because when you're in it, you just, it's normal. It's like living in a cold climate or something. It's a part of what it is to be there, and you don't think of it in the way of how it might be impacting and how it might be shaping your life, particularly when they got to, because I thought it was interesting that you know, Preston and, you know, that Preston sort of knew the difference between right and wrong and was building his own business, but still managed to get sort of drawn back into those to those situations. So sometimes it's just about being able to have those moments to reflect, and I think there's a certain power that comes with that. Thought there was another hand. There you go.
One thing that I thought was really powerful about this movie was their sense of why they were all there. And like the other day I was talking with Rob, our weights coach, and he just like chatting about the team. And he was asking me like how do we feel about why we're here? And like our why is always win WCCs or win the next big race. And their sense of why they were there was just so solidified. And I think it was really powerful to see, like you were saying, like that internal reflection that you can reflect on yourself and reflect on why we're all here. And I know, I'm sure each of us have like our own why we're here, but to see it magnified so beautifully in this film, it was just really powerful to see an entire team come together like that for one sole purpose that was way greater than any race.
Another hand over there.
So I think one of my favorite scenes in this movie actually happens pretty early on when we're talking about how they first get into the sport in the cafeteria. And it took them 2 days. Because the first day they walked up and they saw the video, they said, oh, it's just a bunch of white guys splashing around. That's not for us. And, you know, thank God those guys like pizza, because that's what Kevin Americans every day. And this is a sport that I think, you know, when you get into it, it's a milestone, it's a real life-changing event, right? You have your before I was a rower and after I was a rower. And I think everybody who comes through this sport, their after I was a rower is a much more positive experience. They gain a lot from it. And I think it goes to show us that being, you know, at the highest level of the sport, Division I, how important representation is. Less than 2% of Division I rowers are Black. And so when you have kids looking at, you know, kids who are around Mission Bay, looking out at us and they see us go by, this is an opportunity that might not even occur to them because they might see like, oh, this is a white person sport, right? But if they were better represented, they could have, you know, the ability and hopefully have access to this really, really positive influence on their lives. I think it's just something good for us to always keep in mind, the effect that we can have on people who we don't even know.
And while you get down to her question, in that same vein, just today, and I will pass it on. There's a great article on the Howard University swim team, which is Black swimmers. There are not a lot of them, but apparently this team is just kicking butt. And it sort of shows this idea of just expanding the possibilities that people have and the possibilities of them to see themselves doing different things. So I'll send that article to you because I was reading it just today and I thought, wow, this is really this is really fascinating. Even they joke that they can't swim. And you know, it's something in the even within the community, we have YMCA's and stuff like that, but it's not swimming and just water sports in general. It's just not something that people gravitate to. So.
I was just gonna say that this movie made me kind of emotional in a way because I come from a very like low income, like gang stricken place from LA. And it's like when I told my parents I was like signing up for the rowing team, they're like, the hell is that? Like that's some white people stuff, like what are you doing there? And I think like what Dave said about representation, it's like so important because I felt comforted in a way to know that there was, like at first I felt lonely here in a way, because I was like, you know, these people have rowed before, I don't know what I'm doing here, like I don't belong here. But to see that they kind of went through the same thing, I don't know, it was very emotional for me. And like now I go back home and like I see friends there, or I see kids there, and I'm like, should like try rowing, you know, go somewhere where there's rowing because it's very life changing, I think so.
So, oh, go ahead.
The film just like resonated with me a lot because it reminded me a lot of like why I wanted to row. It just, rowing was something that like brought together so many different people, and like I think that's a wonderful opportunity it has to like change people's lives. So I think it's very powerful to use sport in this way.
Yeah, I wish you know, they talk about it just for a little bit that part of the impetus for the rowing team was to get scholarships that they could actually, this idea that they could maybe go on to college on rowing scholarships and that kind of thing. And I thought that was that was sort of the way the founders saw the program. And I think that somewhere in that process that there was this realization that the academic potential part of it was in some ways a lot less important than the spiritual part that the students were actually experiencing while they were going through the process. But it is, I mean, it's interesting to think that only 2% of the rowers are you know, African American, and some of that might be like, you know, it's a costly sport, right? Is it? I mean, is that? Yeah, it costs money, and it's part of that whole sort of economic ecosystem that influences what sports that you know that people gravitate towards. If you're 6'5", you know, Black male, you're supposed to play basketball, but I'm a hockey fan. I'm like, man, if you're 6'5" and I put you on a pair of skates, then you're almost 7 feet. I'm like, man, that might be the sport for you, but it's a very expensive undertaking to become proficient at that. And maybe, you know, one of the lessons that we can learn from something like this is to find ways to pull down the economic barriers, you know, that between sort of rowing and tennis and ice hockey and those things that can be sort of, you know, financially prohibitive for people to start to participate in.
So one of the things that we try to do with each one of the BLM social justice and advocacy series events is create some time for us to talk in smaller groups. So what we're going to do, we only have, we're going to go through some norms and then the expectations of these groups. But then I was hoping maybe we could kind of do like a 4 corners of about 8 people eight to 10 people in each group to be able to just kind of talk in like a smaller, not so big area. And then Richard's gonna facilitate the online group. So I will end it up.
All right, so really quickly, these are just some norms that we just ask you guys all to abide by, just out of respect for everybody in the room. So, listen with intentionality and be okay with awkward silences. Don't be afraid to speak your truth, share authentically your own stories, and use I statements. We ask you to respect confidentiality. If somebody shares something that they would like to, remain within the group, we ask that you respect that. Experience and lean into discomfort. Some of these topics, they might not be, your area of familiarity. We still ask that you try and offer what you have. Be mindful of time so all can share. Recognize that this is unfinished work. I think it was really shown in the movie, like 20 years later, it's still going, and they're still striving for excellency. Recognize your communication style, whether you're, extremely verbal or it takes you a little bit longer to develop your thoughts. We ask that you respect that. Examine your own assumptions and perceptions. So I think that was pretty straightforward. And now we're gonna hop into some breakout sessions. So just 4 corners.
Yeah, we'll do the 4 corners and just tell them what to talk about.
Okay, yeah. So
I'll take this corner back here.
Okay, so Dr. Pierson will be in the back corner, and the 3 of us will be occupying the rest, so you can fill in where you want. And just some things that if you're not sure what to share an aha moment experience from listening to the panel of speakers or the movie. Something that really struck you in a way that was meaningful or influential. What has been your experience when it comes to these themes? And then lastly, what are you currently doing in your workspace or community? And what are you going to do to encourage change? So just keep some of these things in mind in relationship to some of the topics and things that have already been going on, and we hope for an excellent discussion.
We have a few people that are still online. Richard is actually, he's a mayor here in California, and he's also part of the planning team. So we were very lucky to have him, even though he is got some events tonight as well, because it is Black History Month and he is very booked out, but he's been such an integral part of these different sessions that have come about, and we're very lucky to have him as part of the team. So he and Kaylee were talking in a group online. Did you one of you want to share out?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Richard save his voice. He has other he needs to do. I took a lot of notes during the movie, mostly quotes that just really struck me. And so that's kind of what we talked about. I'm a teacher. So the first thing that really spoke to me was when I think it was one of the moms said, how can you expect a child to learn with all the trauma that they've experienced, because they're just worried about surviving. And so learning is not really a priority. It's just not something they're even capable of doing. And I thought it was really interesting hearing about how it actually alters the brain. And the trauma being more severe than combat veterans was also something that struck me, because my husband's a Marine, and so I know what that side is like. And just to think of school-age children having to deal with that severity of just ongoing trauma it's just really, it's difficult to think about. But knowing that there are students out there who are experiencing this it's important to know. I noted some of the spiritual things that people talked about too. I teach in a Catholic school. So hearing all the people saying that, the one, I think it was Marques, who said that God saved his mom. And then from there, every family member changed for the better. And we also talked about the trauma being generational and how if that's all you see and your experience that you live, how do you know that there's another choice? And then we talked about how rowing was not a bad choice. It was just a different choice, and how sometimes that's all you need to change your life is to just make a different choice. But having those tools and those options are something that need to be out there and that we need to make kids aware of. And I think that's all we got to in our conversation.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is going to go around and join the different groups. So with the microphone so that everyone can hear as well.
All right, I'll start off with the group that I was a part of. If anybody would like to share anything that I got a chance to hear that was really impactful, now's your time to shine. If not, I don't mind.
I can share. Something we talked about at the end was an aha moment where they all kind of shared their sense of why they were racing and what they were racing for. And we kind of talked about how we all have a sense of why, or else we wouldn't be coming every day and grinding and working really hard. And even though like their senses of why and their purpose for doing this was something so monumental and great, like we all have one too. And I feel like that's what's so special about rowing and sports in general, is that it gives us a sense of purpose deeper than ourselves. And for them, it was super impactful to see that being carried out through their race and through their training.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to the back here. Any brains?
Hi. So we talked a bit about accessibility and how it's just like it's so clear how rowing has had such a positive impact on our lives and the people's and people in the movie too. Like how it can just completely change your life or completely change the direction your life is headed. And it's just like, imagine if it was just accessible to so many more people. You know, it's like people have to drive 40 minutes to get to practice. And, you know, especially in high school, it's like practice fees are expensive. You need, you know, like a lot of us have had our parents' support, and we didn't have like any support from the parents, and you know, they still got it done. I'm feeling really, really grateful right now that I had the resources I did growing up. Like the boathouse was close enough, I could bike there, I could carpool, and you know, I could afford to go and row. And like it did completely change my life. And it teaches you so much, you know, about yourself, about sports, but like life skills. And I don't know, I keep thinking like if only everyone had this opportunity, we would just be like alive. You know, we'd be a lot better off, a lot more better off. Yeah.
Thank you. A lot to be grateful for, right? Add to this group.
That's Dr. Pierson's. Yeah.
Hey, group number 3, do we have any brave slides with some great ideas?
This is something I shared with the group, and I really wanted to share with all of you. I think it's really important to recognize the kind of strength that it takes to stay and fight the fight. When you talk about the level of trauma that people have, the experience, the fact that they just don't run the first chance they get and never look back, I think is real. It's worth noting. As someone, you know, I'm from that community, and I haven't been back in 30 years. And I'm not proud of it, but I also know that when you go through a traumatic experience, you don't look for great opportunities to repeat that in your life. And so the fact that Marques and those folks and Craig and people like that are still on the ground in the community fighting the fight, I think needs to be commended and needs to be recognized for what it is, which is a really, really difficult thing to do. Especially when you start to, someone like Marques, who is an author and has other things that he could be doing, that he's there doing it every single day. And that should really be commended, because we take that, we hear all the time that people, well, you should go back to your neighborhood and that kind of stuff. But as I was saying, when a soldier comes back and they have suffered a trauma, we never go, oh, don't you want to go back into combat again? We recognize that does something to them and changes the decision-making that they have in their life. And I think that it would help us to recognize that we're dealing with that same level of conversation, so.
Yes, definitely. I want to give a big shout out to Marques Cooper for all the work he's been doing back home. It's not easy to go back to a community full of trauma and provide such positivity. All right, group 4, do we have any?
So our group talked a lot about like different aspects of the movie, but one thing that we talked about a lot, as well as the other groups did, was the trauma and how this intergenerational trauma like didn't just start, like Claire was talking about how people didn't just sign up and say we're gonna start gangs today. Like it was a cycle of things, and it started, back in history, it started from slavery. And we were also talking about how in the movie, like, we didn't really feel like the way they talked about the trauma that they experienced, like it didn't make us feel super like depressed or like sad, because they kind of like said it in a nonchalant way. And so we were talking about how like these guys just like, this is just part of their daily life, and it's a normal thing for them, but for us it was like, it's unheard of for most of us. And so we were talking about ways that we're gonna make a change, and one of that is what Emma was saying about possibly having kids come to our.
Do you want me to elaborate?
Yeah.
Well, it kind of got dropped off, but like watching this film kind of like re-inspired me to maybe be like, perhaps we could start up again. But there was like a thing in the works past like 2 years that Raina and Marissa and I were on like a committee for to like bus kids in from National City and kind of introduce them to SDRC and to the rowing club, and just kind of create a space for them, which hasn't been done before. But like we mentioned at the beginning, like funding doesn't always work. It doesn't always follow through, but like that's the kind of thing that we have to be doing in order to create a rowing community that's representative of American, representative of creating the opportunities that Nikki was talking about earlier. Because imagine if a bunch of kids from National City who don't have all the opportunities that we've had suddenly are in this world where when you're in a boat together, you have to figure it out, and a beautiful community is created out of that. Like we've all experienced that. We've all had these huge, huge milestones that make us feel great and make us feel like we could do anything. And then we go out into the community and we make great lives for ourselves. I think so many communities in America are missing out on that. And it's up to us because we can do it. So like, sorry that I'm on this like soapbox right now, but it's just like seeing this. I mean, I feel like this really made me emotional watching it. I think we're all very like-minded people, and we all have such great capacities for empathy in this room. And I don't think we should shy away from really hard things here. I think we should run towards them.
Well, and I will say I'm on the board of a local school that's always looking for opportunities for the kids who attend that school. And all of the kids are brought there because their families are in underserved communities. And so these are the types of inspiring moments that we will do whatever we can to help you move that idea forward and into fruition. So I'm very excited to hear about the conversations that have been had. Because there is a time that we do like to stop on time. Did you want to talk a little bit about the resources?
Yeah, so these are just some resources that we thought might be of use to some people in the room. And so the first one is San Diego Youth Services. They're having their next event, which is Birth of a Brilliance Conference, and that link will take you to the registration for that. You can learn a little bit more about what they do there. The second one is from the Palestine Solidarity Committee during the Al-Qaeda Bazaar today. Not today, I'm sorry, this past week. We got a chance to meet up with them and have a conversation with them. And they want to do a lot of work with partnering with, Black student organizations here on campus, and really anybody who will lend a ear to their movement and trying to destigmatize in their areas too. So that's kind of along the lines of the work that we do here with destigmatization and building bridges with different communities. And then the last is a book that has recently come out from Dr. Joy Spencer, who used to work here, I believe.
Interim dean.
Yes. So, and it's a book called Anti-Blackness at School, a book of creating affirming educational spaces for African American students. So I just thought it would be an educational resource for maybe anybody in here who has interest in education. And there's just a few resources that we thought we could provide. We try and give resources during every event, and so there'll be different ones for our next March event. And then these are our social medias. You can reach us in any of these ways. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then last but not least, I'd like to hand it over to another great colleague of ours. And I won't steal the spotlight from her either. I want her to do it.
Thank you so much. I'm Martha Fuller. I'm faculty in the School of Nursing, and my specialty is pediatrics. And I found this movie incredibly moving for a variety of reasons, part of which is because we're constantly learning and teaching about the effects of trauma on kids and long-term effects. And for me to be moving forward. And I think the quote that you can't go forward alone really spoke to me, that we saw that in this movie. We saw that, actually I'm seeing it in you and your interest in what you're doing. We can't move forward alone, and I think that it's a very positive statement. I clearly want to thank Dr. Jez for coordinating the hashtag BLM and more group. We've got a lot of other upcoming events that'll be good. One in March 24th. I think there's a flyer out in the door. And Dr. Pierson for suggesting this movie, which was wonderful. I had never seen it, and this is fabulous. It's definitely something I think I want to recommend to a lot of people to see. And to Juliana for sharing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And to Marques and to Richard for all the coordination events. But really more, I want to thank all of you. It's a Friday afternoon, Friday evening. I mean, it's time to go relax and kick back. And instead you're here talking about some pretty serious issues. So I think it's fabulous. It certainly makes me really excited about moving forward. So thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you in March.
So we have one last little piece. So yes, we do have the March event, which is actually going to be kind of a cookout idea. We'll have some speakers, some community partners who are there. And we'll also have food. We'd also love to have any feedback you could give us. If you could actually use the QR code over on your right and just give us some feedback about this event and anything that we could do to support the work being done across campus. And just a final, thank you so much for being here and supporting us. This is our first hybrid event. It's always been on Zoom. And so it was really powerful to see this room full and the discussions that happened because of that. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart.